Thank you so much for coming and coming to listen. And I feel so honored to be able to speak with you. I definitely feel like I have the luxury of being here, in New York in more safety. But I appreciate you coming to show up for yourselves, really. I think what you've created, Maya, is incredible. I think it's so hard when you're in the middle of a crisis to attend to yourself. That is the biggest challenge, right? And it's a lot of what I'm going to talk about today. So let me just talk to you a little bit about myself. I'm a clinical psychologist. I live in Brooklyn, in New York. Right now, I'm in private practice. I've been in private practice for around 20 years. My specialty is working with people who've experienced trauma, what we call incident trauma, which is having experienced a very scary event. It could be a car accident, could be an assault, violence, or most of the time, and most of the clients that come to me have experienced more than one trauma, and in addition to that, are coming with experiences of childhood trauma. I've worked in various settings over the course of my life and training. In addition to private practice, I've worked with I work only with adults in my private practice, but I worked with children and adolescents for around 10 years. I worked with veterans at the VA hospital in Brooklyn. I've worked in a number of clinical settings. My niche over the past, would say, around 8 years or so, 10 years ago, is working with doing somatic psychotherapy. So, what does that mean? In traditional talk therapy, at least the talk therapy that I was trained in when I was in graduate school, the mind, thoughts, and emotions were what was focused on. And over time, through working with a lot of the times war veterans, but also victims of assault, victims of rape, victims of childhood abuse, it has people have come to understand that it's not just the mind and not just emotions that are impacted. The body is really kind of highly involved in the processing of trauma. And in fact, not addressing what's happening in the body is kind of neglecting an entire source of information and portal towards healing. So that is, most people that come to me for that particular kind of work. My intention today is to talk to you first about what is trauma, by definition of what we're talking about, and then what happens in the nervous system in reaction to stress. We'll talk about what post-traumatic stress disorder is. And then what I'd like to do, if we have time, is do some sequences that I teach to almost all of my clients to help process through stress reactions. So trauma can have many definitions, but I think for today, we're going to address the trauma of what happened on October 7th. We're going to kind of use that as sort of the definition of the trauma here. And then, the events that occurred on October 7th, the emotional and physical reactions to it, and then what's happened after, which include ongoing fear, interruption of, normal life for Israelis, having family members going into the military, either for reserves or having family members, friends, at war, ongoing grief around so many losses, and ongoing stress and worry about the missing hostages. On top of that, incoming information all the time from social media, from the news, more information about what happened, and kind of the world at large and what's happening in terms of the rise of anti-Semitism, concerns about not being believed. I mean, so there's so much happening at one time. So I think that it's important to just kind of talk first about the initial reactions to any trauma, to any stress. So for this, we can talk about the trauma as being a highly terrifying, scary event, right? That the nervous system had a very extreme reaction to, right? Where the nervous system had to mobilize in some way, right? So the normal initial reactions to witnessing such event, and I think everyone can share in this, in feeling stunned, disoriented, being unable to sort of integrate the information, common responses have included feeling anxious, nervous, overwhelmed, grief-stricken. There's been changes to thought patterns, sometimes even repeated and vivid memories of the event. The memories, in addition to the memories, there are physical reactions, increased heartbeat, sweating, decreased concentration, difficulty making decisions, decreased sleep, decreased appetite. And then there's sensitivity to the environment, sensitivity to loud noises, to sirens, to, I don't know, even people walking on the street, could kind of create fear. What you might witness over time are strained interpersonal reactions, stress-related physical symptoms. Yes, right, Liat, the feeling of being stuck and frozen, not wanting to do much. Well, we're going to get to that. Sounds, physical stress reactions can include the headaches, nausea, chest pain, exacerbations of any previous physical issues that one has, increased tension in the body. So during a traumatic event, our nervous systems and muscular systems are activated. This is all happening automatically. We are not in control of this. The body uses the acute stress response to prepare to fight, flight, or freeze. This is all, the body's way of protecting itself. It's just, these are all survival instincts. They come from the most primitive parts of our brain. And we are not in control over these responses. So what happens is, during a fight, flight, or freeze response, many physiological changes occur. The reaction first starts in the amygdala part of the brain, and then the amygdala sends signals to the hypothalamus. And then that stimulates the autonomic nervous system. So what's the autonomic nervous system? The autonomic nervous system consists of two branches. One is the sympathetic nervous system, and one is the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay. So the sympathetic nervous system is the part of our nervous system that is responsible for our fight response and our flight response. The parasympathetic part of our nervous system is responsible for rest and digest, but also the freeze response. So what happens when our bodies are detect danger, right? Cortisol and adrenaline are released very quickly, and there are a number of changes in the body that happen. First, our heart rates increase, right? The reason for that is our heart rate increases in order to bring oxygen to the major muscle groups in our body, which are, the muscles in our arms and our legs. Why? Because this allows a mobilization response to fight, right? We fight with our arms, with our legs, and to flight, to run away, right? On the other hand, sometimes fight or flight is not available to us, right? And so what happens? we go into a freeze response, right? So the freeze response is, you can often see children, going into that response, but I think all of us go into the freeze response. And this is a very adaptive response to danger, which is, why do we freeze? We freeze when we don't have access to running away or fighting. We freeze to be undetected, right? Like this is a very, very, very very strong animal instinct. For instance, and specifically for women and children, right? Because women and children by history don't physically, we couldn't kind of get in there and fight. So what do? We would hide literally, behind a tree and freeze so that we wouldn't be detected, right? And this is throughout time, and also animals have the same type of response.
אני יכולה להגיד שבמקרה שלי אני יכולה להזדהות עם הפייט, כי שהבת שלי הייתה קטנה והיו אזעקות, הייתי סוחפת אותה, אני גרה בקומה הרביעית בידיים, she went into freeze mode, והיא לא יכלה לזוז, ואני הייתי סוחבת אותה בארבע קומות, לא הרגשתי את זה, למטה, למעלה, למטה, למעלה, בלי להרגיש שאני סוחפת אותה, I was in the mother like fight mode.
כן, אני יכולה להזדהות עם זה, אני ביומיים הראשונים אני פשוט, כל מה שעשיתי זה לסדר את הממ"ד, והוא היה עמוס בציוד בצורה מטורפת, שכל פעם אמרתי, עד שאני אגיע לשם, ועד שאני אסתדר, ועד שאני אפנה, ופתאום, אתה יודע, ב-24 שעות, כל הדבר הזה היה בתוך הסלון שלי, ולא היה אכפת לי משום דבר, וכאילו הזזתי רהיטים, רק בשביל לפנות מקום, בשביל שהוא יוכל לישון בשקט בלילה, אבל כן, לי יש הרגשה שאני נעה ביניהם בחודש הזה.
Right, so the freeze is an immobilization, right? And the fight is mobilization, is moving the energy. So I'm just gonna continue, but then I want to talk more about it after, another aspect that can happen during the fight, flight, freeze is also the lungs, the breathing speeds up. Why? To bring more oxygen to the blood. In freeze, though, there's more of a restriction. Sometimes there's a forgetting to breathe, or the breathing really, really slows down, but not in a pleasurable way, in more of a kind of irregular and unsteady way, right? Eyes, our peripheral vision increases, our pupils dilate in order to let more light in, and this is again very, very adaptive. It is to kind of be able to assess danger and be prepared. Blood, our blood thickens, so that's to improve clotting in case there's injury. Our skin, there's more sweating involved, or if you're in a freeze, right, there's more almost like a coldness to the skin, right? Hands and feet, our hands and feet can be typically cold because all the blood again is going to our major muscle groups in order to mobilize. And pain perception, we biologically are wired not to feel much fear during an acute stress response. So I mean, this is all to say that our nervous systems are really there for us to help us survive, right? And these things happen implicitly, automatically, without us having to think about it. So, I think that what happens after a trauma occurs, right? And then I think in the case with what's happening in Israel, this is ongoing stress, is that our nervous systems tend to be overreactive, right? We're kind of stuck either in the overreactive, what's called hyperarousal. Hyperarousal is like you feel the increased heartbeat, your thoughts are racing, there's more irritability, anger, more feel a need to want to move all of the time, or in hypoarousal. And what can that be? That can be a freeze reaction. A freeze reaction is a really tough place to be, because at once you're not moving, but the internal experience is highly, highly, highly activated. And so while the freeze reaction is a very adaptive response, meaning we have that reaction for a reason. It is to survive extreme circumstances, right? To not be detected. If you remain in that place for too long, it is it's pretty bad for the nervous system, and for overall health and for our psyches. The body wants to move that energy, that survival energy, out. It wants to mobilize. It wants to release. Okay, that is how we're wired as animals, really. Like if you see, if you ever watch nature videos of, let's say, a lion chasing an impala, in the savannah, let's say, the impala will run, it will flight, and even if it's attacked, or if it escapes the attack, right, when it feels like the coast is clear, right, that it's escaped the danger, if the lion didn't get it, it will kind of like, it'll like shake off, like the skin will kind of like ripple, and then it's kind of over for them. Like they're not in a trauma response, right? The animals don't have our very sophisticated brains where then they go into memory and they're processing. They're all instincts. So they know how to move that fear energy and survival energy through their body. Our nervous systems are the same as an animal, right? So we're wired to actually move the energy out via release, but we have very, very sophisticated minds, and so it does get in the way, because we have memory and we think, and we have almost deeper feelings. So we can't just move the survival energy out. We can get stuck, So what happens after there's a trauma is our tolerance for really any stimuli gets reduced. So sort of in an optimal nervous system, we have what's called a wide window of tolerance, right? Where it takes a lot to pop us into what's called hyperarousal or into hypoarousal, right? But when you experience a trauma, right, or you are in fear, or you have less of a tolerance, right? So you can much more easily feel fear or survival energy for the purposes of this discussion. And this is also adaptive, right? Your system is now more prone to anticipate danger, right? It's on the lookout, right? It's not in anticipation of safety, of good things. So Liat asked, do each of us have a specific pattern, only freeze for all stress situations, or is it dynamic, and can we control it? Such a good question. I think that, I don't think there's, I think that's, all of us are coming into any situation with our, our very unique bodies, nervous systems, and history, right? And so I think that there are some people, right, who are more prone towards freeze, that are more prone towards that reaction, right? But a well-functioning nervous system, you should have access to all of it, right? But I think that when you're somebody that has history of trauma, right? And that has a very wide definition, but because most of us have experienced trauma before this, right? Like that, and especially if you're living in Israel, right? Even if it didn't happen in your social life or personal life, you're living in a country that is there's always war, imminent war, so that is a trauma in it of itself, right? So I think that there are I think that there are I think that there are people who have more of a tendency towards freezing, and there are people who have more of a tendency towards fight, right? There's some people, and you kind of know if who you are, if you tend to argue more or get aggressive more, or feel like something is a slight more, like you're more towards fight, more prone towards fighting, right? But I think that most people have a mix of that kind of reaction. I think that if you have a history of trauma, and depending how the trauma was processed before, you might have a tendency in one direction. Can we control that? Okay, so that's what I want to kind of get to during our discussion today. So I'm gonna take you through that a little bit. And yes, there is an adrenaline rush. Adrenaline is one of the hormones that gets released when there's a perceived danger. Okay, having problems with breathing deeply for about a week, yeah, that can happen, right? What happens when there's a problem breathing deeply is that there's so much constriction in the entire system that being able to take a deep, satisfying breath really gets limited. So in some ways, you kind of want to like figure out how to relax the system. And by the system, I mean your body at large, in order to access deeper breathing. And adrenaline is one of the hormones that is released by the body in order to mobilize, right? In order to fight or to run away, right? In order to be able to basically deal with the danger. But what happens post-trauma is that the body is more prone to adrenalization, the perception of danger is heightened, and so your body is constantly releasing adrenaline, which can just be incredibly uncomfortable and distressing. I think that part of what I see is really important for people living in Israel right now, right? Given the circumstance that you're in, there's still sirens, you're still having to go into the safe room, there's ongoing distress, right? Is being able to figure out how to find breaks to release the buildup of stress in the body. How do we do that? Okay.
Feeling the stress and etc. is also connected to the genetic.
I mean, I think that there's definitely, some, we're all born, with a specific code, right? And there's certainly some people who have more sensitivity and more tendency towards being activated, highly activated and stressed. So you have a multiple things going on at one time. One, there's the genetics, right? How you're born. There's your family history, and also the intergenerational history of trauma, which also can impact genetics. And then there's the current situation, right? And your own personal history. So I think that all the factors can contribute to how sensitive and how reactive one is to a situation. But I think that there are very few people who aren't going to have some, trauma reaction, some highly sensitive reaction to this type of situation.
It hurt me in my muscles, in my nerves and muscles and everything, only in my legs.
What happens is, well, I think everybody has a reaction, right? Some people, probably what you're witnessing, are able to kind of feel it and then move through it. They can kind of come down, to a place where they are able to, one, not experience physical pain, two, be able to talk about things, be able to function in life. And some people, depending not only on genetics, but also history, it can be harder to let go of. It can hit the body's function, specifically legs, right? Like, I don't know anything about you, Ellie, but the legs carry a lot of tension, right? There's a lot of muscles there. So I suppose one thing you might want to understand about your own system is how much tension is being held, and like, to what extent can some of that be released?
I was healthy person. It happened after the corona. I'm not infected, but when they close all the area and I can't meet anybody and I was alone, then it started.
I mean, there's a few aspects of corona that I think I've noticed have impacted everyone's health. One, there are some people who've developed actually had the virus and experienced what's called long COVID, and that has impacted the system in many ways, but has caused a lot of inflammation and symptoms that have lasted sometimes up until now. But two, the social isolation has been very harmful. And, one of the ways right now to cope with what's happening is to make sure that you remain connected, because that is one of the ways that we can offset the impact of trauma is social connection, being with people, talking with others. Yeah, it's really, really important.
Yes.
And science has backed that up. So I was doing some thinking about your particular circumstances right now, right? Given that there's ongoing anticipation of potential danger. I mean, is that what you experience? Yeah. We can't really say, well, now it's safe, right? Like, the mind is not going to fully believe that in a sort of total way. Yeah. Okay, Lori, yes. We're going to practice some coping mechanisms, and I'm going to take you through a sequence that I think will be helpful for you. But what I think can happen is you can kind of view your systems like a mammal, like a mammalian system. And when there is immediate safety, meaning if the coast is clear right now, allow yourself to take it. Allow yourself to take in the safety. Yeah, I know. I hear you, Galit. It's true. So what do you do? What do you do when there's imminent risk, but your body still needs a chance to release the fear energy, right? Because we can't stay on high alert or reverse in a kind of freeze response for too long. It's not healthy for the nervous system. So what do you do in the meantime? Like, what do you feel is the biggest barrier? Yeah, to breathe, to walk, to meditate. Yeah. I also think that one thing would be really helpful to you is when you're watching news, which I know everybody is, right? To keep a body part moving, even like one part of you moving, dancing, right? Dancing, singing, all of those things are so good, but when you're taking in, keep something moving at all time. yeah, some people, you know, can't watch the news. Yeah, working, doing things, right? Mobilization, moving is the healthiest place that the body wants to move. Too much time kind of stuck looking at the phone, yeah, looking at social media, you know, watching the news, isn't good for the system. We need to keep moving. Another thing that I teach all of my clients is something called uncoupling. So what is that? And taking in small pieces of information. So let's say, you know, let's say you have a memory of what happened, or then image comes to your mind of the hostages. You know, I mean, I know that for me that happens sometimes, right? I notice that my system can only take a tiny bit, you know, and if you can just take in a tiny bit and then connect to what's happening in your body, you know, kind of like slow down the process and see what's happening. Notice if you're tense anywhere. Notice if there's any impulses. Does your body want to do anything? That can be helpful. What I'm going to do right now, I think, is take you through a sequence that you can practice in, you know, in total or in bits, you know, throughout your day, really. And this was taught to me by, you know, a teacher. Her name is Irene Lyon. So what the sequence is, it basically consists of is orienting to your environment, orienting to your body, and orienting to your inner world. Okay, does that seem good for you guys right now? Yeah. So I mean, the formula, you know, in terms of being able to tolerate what's going on, right, is not, you know, like you wrote, Liat, going too much in the mind, right? Like always returning to what's happening on the body level. And that is the best way that we can process through the stress and the trauma as it's happening, you know? So the first part of this is, I just want you to I want you to just sit and take a moment to just notice what's happening. Notice if you're holding your body in any particular way. Notice how your heart feels. Notice if there's any tension. And notice if any of that tension can be released just by kind of moving differently, you know. Notice if there are any instincts, any impulses. Yeah. And now what I'm going to do is take you through the first part of this, which is visually orienting. Now, our eyes tell us whether there is danger, right? That's part of our system. So, you know, when we're very stressed out and we're vigilant, we move like this. We're scanning, right? And that actually creates a message to the nervous system, you know, there's danger, right? There's danger. And then your nervous system reacts, right? Either through a freeze response or through a hyperarousal, right? Now, one thing that we can teach ourselves to do is learn to scan our environment, but in a very slow manner. And what happens then? That if there is no danger, right? If the coast is clear, so to speak, it sends the message to your system, right? To our mammalian nervous system that it's safe, right? And but you're prepared, right? So you see what's happening around you, you're prepared, but right now it's safe, right? So what I want you to do is, you know, starting from one side, let's say, starting from looking towards your left, we're just going to allow our eyes to take in what's around us. And in a really slow micro movement of our head, we're going to watch. We're going to look around. And you can let your eyes fall on whatever is around you. And the key here is to move slow. And move kind of all the way to the other side. Yeah. And as you're doing this, just notice what's happening in your body. Just notice your environment. Great. Now the next part is I want you to widen your arms and just notice the space that you take up. Just look at your fingertips. Notice the length of your wingspan. Then bring your hands together. Notice the shape of your hands. Shape your fingers. And as you're doing that, what do you notice happening in your body? And now the next part is placing your feet on the ground and just feeling the ground under your feet. And when you put slight pressure, what happens? And now notice your chair holding you or the ground holding your underside. Great. And now for the last part, you can close your eyes if you want to. If not, that's okay too. And what I'm going to ask you to do is just orient to your breath. Just follow the natural pattern of your breath. You don't have to try and force anything. Just notice breath coming in and breath leaving. And something you can imagine when you're breathing in is that the breath is going all the way down to your belly. And you can notice even the pause between the inhale and the exhale. And, when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And if you'd like, share with me where you're at, what you notice. Yeah, more stable, compassion, appreciative, calmer, grounded, in control. It's great. Yeah. And now stay with that feeling. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that type of sequence, and I can write it out for you all, I think it can really be helpful as a kind of thing that you can do throughout the day, and this, if you think of it as just sort of like clearing things out, right? There's so much you're taking in all of the time. The nervous system only has but so much room. After a while, it gets flooded, and we need to clear out all of that fear energy, that survival energy, in order to make room for more, right? Because it's not that more is not going to come in, but if you can see it as a system, right? And I think that, what's good to know, like always, is that sense of calm and stability is accessible to you. It's not that far from the surface, and so if you have if the option is there to feel it, right, in between stressors, right, it's okay to take it. It's good, it's needed, it's necessary, right? Because everyone needs to function, needs to you know hold strength, right? To create safety for children, to work at their jobs, to live their lives. And so it's necessary, really, to be able to let the system release. And, you know, someone had asked me a question earlier about like moving out of freeze, right? That's a sequence that can move you out of freeze, you know. But I wanna make some time for more questions, because it would be wonderful to hear what you need right now, you know. And our instincts are there for us, you know. And even when they feel overwhelming now, right? Even when the stress is flooding your body now, I think it's important to not see it as a force you're fighting against, but more like a communication, you know, of instinctual part of your body, you know, and to see it as actually there to want to take care of you, you know. It's like the ultimate, you know, act of love, really, for oneself, right? Like of survival. Yeah. I mean, but just know, even when you're thinking about, you know, the people at the festival, like even right now, like what happens? Like, what do you notice happens in your body? Someone asked about the importance of being social, but you still can't think about leaving the house. Well, I guess, yeah, I guess one question to ask is, you know, are you in a state of fear? Is that are you avoiding leaving the house? Is there a way that, you know, you can warm up to that? You know, is there a way of connecting even if you don't leave the house? Can someone come over? You know, can someone spend time with you? Or can you speak on the phone? You know, I think that, you know, it's an important question. Your body, right, needs to feel some sense of safety, right? There's kind of an inner conflict going on, right? Part of it is wanting to be able to return to life, but the fear is so great, right? That and the risk feels so immense that that you don't want to put yourself out there, which is totally understandable. I think that a lot of support is needed. Do you have people in your life? Do you have access to a therapist, a mental health professional that can help you through it? Because something that can happen, I mean, it sounds to me like the intensity of the trauma is severe, and what's happening is that there's an avoidance response, you know, and it is all just to feel safe. It is all for safety. However, there's a point, right, where the avoidance can create a lot of disruption to life. At some point, there's kind of a weighing out of, you know, is this what's more harmful? Now, the problem is, you know, even if logically, you know, you kind of know it's better to be in the world, your body might be so seized up, right, that it's beyond logic. I think it's a question for, you know, what I would first suggest is that you're very kind to yourself and compassionate. And a lot of people are experiencing this. And it's a human reaction to a very, very, very horrible situation that human beings are not wired to experience. Yeah. And I think it would be good to get support. And I think that one idea to keep in mind is that even if it doesn't feel, even if you're not at a place where you are ready to go outside, you know, if that's just not where you are right now, you know, if you can find ways to deepen into safety in your body, even at home, I think that's a step forward. You know, it doesn't have to be one or the other. it's very important, I think, especially if you know of people who are more isolated, right? If there's, perhaps someone that lives alone, or an elderly person that's on their own, or that we reach out, that there's more community, because people are wired to connect and to feel safety in connection. I think, some people, the fear and the intensity of the fear, depending on your system, depending on your history, depending on where you are, depending on if you have other adults in your house with you, it can be quite intense. And I think that's when we're starting to look at post-traumatic stress. It's hard to actually be in life. It's okay. Your body will know when it's ready. It might take longer than other people. That's all right. It's okay. The kinder you are to yourself, the better it is for your system. Yeah. So I hope that this was helpful. I hope you all know that here in America, across the sea, we're thinking of you all of the time. We worry about you. We love you. And I pray for you, and I'm here, and thank you so much for having me and letting me be here with you.
Yeah.